Just say.
Okay, Joe Rogan on the latest podcast with Luke Thomas believes Jon Jones is a GOAT and says Jones' early career and fights up until Gustafsson surpassed Khabib. He also,
Is that really what he said?
yeah, that's what he said. So,
Okay.
so let's continue on with what he said. He also said that look at the way he beat DC in the first fight. He's basically saying that he took him down, and we all know that DC is a world class wrestler, right? So it's quite an achievement. So personally, I mean, we talked about this last week too. I still think that Khabib is. I still think he's a GOAT. It always comes back to the issue of steroids with Jon Jones, but as you said last week as well, no one's really gonna know until a few years in the future. Maybe once they go back to the old samples and they actually check if he was on steroids or he wasn't on steroids. But I think it's a consensus that like even if he took it, it was trace amounts. But even then, I'm gonna stick with Khabib, especially after that last fight with Gaethje. As we said last week as well, it just makes sense that at this point he is the GOAT. So, I mean, that's me.
But okay, so would you assume that every fight before Jon Jones got popped, he was clean or no?
I mean, that's a pretty big assumption. I don't know about that, but
No, what do you think? Would you say he was clean before, or do you also say no? Since he got popped that time, you could assume that he was taking it all the way up until that point.
I mean, I want to think that when he first came into the UFC, probably not so, but I think maybe a few years in the future after he kept fighting the UFC, I think he probably started taking it.
Before or after the championship?
After.
After the championship. So you said that Joe Rogan was talking about how up until Gustafsson, right?
Yeah, so I think after the fight with Shogun,
I
think after the fight with Shogun is when he started popping it. But even then,
after the fight with he won the championship. When he beat.
Yeah, I know.
Shogun.
Yeah, so the fight after that is when he started taking it. Honestly, like it just because you see what he did to. So actually, I watched a fight against Rashad Evans and Rampage Jackson, and the fight with Machida. And like if you actually watch these fights, he didn't lose any of these rounds. And the way he just ran, and the way he just ran through these guys, it just didn't look too clean to me. I don't know. And after with that whole scandal with the steroids and like hiding underneath the ring and everything, I don't know. Like to me, it's too shady, it's too fishy. But I don't know. It's
you can't take away what he did in those in the octagon, like you said, right? So he still beat all those guys, and those guys are all champions in their own rights. Machida, Rashad Evans, and Rampage were all champions at one point, and he did beat them. But the thing is that what did he necessarily beat them with? He didn't necessarily beat them with the best cardio. He didn't necessarily beat them with the most power. He just used his abilities and techniques, his athleticism and his point fighting, where he just wears you down with his reach to beat the opponent. So yes, steroids would help you, or some performance enhancing drug will help you have an edge, right? Physically, it won't hinder you. Will help you, of course.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, do you think he actually really needed them? I don't think he needed them to beat any of those guys.
I'll tell you this though. Speaking on his athleticism, I remember, I'm not sure if it was past the Shogun fight, but I remember there's an article saying that his lifts basically they skyrocketed, right? As in like his bench, his squat, his deadlift. And like no matter how you put it though, he was on PEDs, right? So if he's fighting these guys on PEDs, even though you could always say, okay, it was up to skill, right? But he's still on the drugs, like this.
No, but you're flip-flopping though, right? Because like you're either in the camp that he was taking them for the purpose of performance enhancing, or were they just tainted supplements and very small traces. So if you're trying to say that he was like on it hardcore and he was it was a like main reason why he's got bigger and stronger, then that's a different scenario. I know of what you're referring to, where he started deadlifting a lot more and whatnot. He previously wouldn't do powerlifting at all, any of the Olympic lifts, from what he said. He only later on in his career fell in love with powerlifting and Olympic lifts, and that's where you saw him get massive, right? You see, I don't know if you've seen that picture where he's just huge. So now there is a presence of PEDs in that bodybuilding community, but to be fair to him, he hasn't been caught for a huge amount of PEDs, other than the first scenario where he claimed later on that it was tainted supplements.
Right. Okay. Well, let's segue into the second topic. The second topic.
So you're done. You just.
We're doing fast.
You agree with? You don't agree with Joe Rogan?
No.
You want to farm likes?
No. So I'll tell you again though. Farming likes. This guy.
You're farming likes for those Khabib fans, you know.
Of course. No. Listen. I'm gonna always say that Khabib is better than Jon Jones.
Just like the video, man.
Listen. No matter what comes out, I'm always gonna say Khabib, only because of of his dominance in the past few years. He's never lost a round, even though they're saying that he's lost a round. That he lost a round to Conor. Okay, fine. You know what? I agree with it.
And technically, he
lost a round with Gaethje. Yeah, with Gaethje. Well. But if you break it down, though, it made no sense because before the takedown, it was all Gaethje. And then past the takedown, it was Khabib.
I get it. It doesn't make sense, but you're talking from a technical standpoint. Oh, he never lost a round. Yeah. Well, I'm just saying he did lose 2 rounds. All right, it's not that big of a deal. Like, of course,
but very controversial rounds.
Lose rounds.
Yeah, but like very controversial rounds. So, you can make an argument that like he still has never lost a round. But yes, yes, he has lost a round. Okay.
My biggest thing is just longevity, right? Like, it's just not long enough. Like a lot of these guys that are in the GOAT status, like a Jon Jones, Anderson Silva, and GSP, they've done it over a very long time.
But also, if we're talking about skill
waves
level
of people,
if we're talking about skill level though, there's a big skill gap between a lightweight and light heavyweight, right? So,
what do you mean?
There's also like argument to be made because with Khabib, he's like in the lightweight division, and the skill is much greater than it is like in the light heavyweight, right? So I don't know.
Not necessarily, and maybe right now, yeah, but not necessarily back in Jon Jones' early time or in GSP's light welterweight time.
Okay.
Right. I'm just saying it's hard to argue against guys that have done it over.
So give me your pick.
Done it over so many years and different waves of generations of fighters, right? Yeah. GSP fought so many different generations and he beat them all, right? Anderson Silva fought many generations and beat them all, right? Jon Jones, the same thing. Jon Jones was champion at 24 years old, right? He's like 32 right now?
He's 33.
That's a lot of fights. He has more championship fights than regular fights.
Yeah, okay, so you agree with Rogan?
It's difficult. I think it's too soon. I think Khabib still has a chance to come back, and we'll see when what he does when he comes back.
What would Khabib have to do in order to just grab onto that GOAT status?
Beating George does help a lot. To think George St. Pierre is in his still prime form, it might be a little overstated, not true, but still beating George at whatever age, 39, is still a big achievement. So I think Khabib, if he beats George St. Pierre, he's up there in the conversation with Jon Jones, George, and Anderson. I still don't necessarily think he would be number one, but it's all hypothetical. So I'm not sure. I would have to see when he wins and how he beats George St. Pierre.
Well, I guess we won't know if he comes or until he comes back, right? So, okay.
If he comes back.
If he comes back. Izzy said that Jon Jones is washed, and he thinks he is jealous of him. Well, there's an argument to be made, because if you go on Twitter, if you go on his Twitter, all he's talking about, he's just talking smack about Izzy, right? But even then, there's not much for him to be jealous of. But I guess honestly, this whole thing, or there was more fuel being added to the fire after Izzy basically said that he was going to go up to light heavyweight, right? And Jon Jones vacated his title. I think this Twitter beef and beef in general is going to keep going on until we have that fight. The fight's probably going to happen sometime next year, I hope. I think that Jon Jones, he might not go to heavyweight until he fights Izzy, but you never know, because if you go to heavyweight, he has a potential matchup against Stipe, potential matchup against also Ngannou, right? Depending on who wins that fight. But what do you think though?
So Jon Jones has a very big ego, and it's been known for since before he was champion. He really talks in like the third person, essentially, where he believes that he's going to be the greatest. He is the greatest. He believes he deserves a lot more respect than he actually gets. Right. So from the MMA community and casuals, they really harp on his. This is his perspective. My impression of what his perspective is they really harp on his negatives, right? So his DUIs, his dope popping for PEDs, everything, the going under the ring. It feels like he believes that everybody harps on that way too much and forgets to put respect on his name, right? Because he is still statistically one of the greatest fighters ever. From a round perspective, beating people like 10-9 essentially every single fight, every single round. He's able to beat other people at their own games. He's able to squash former champions like their regular top 15 fighters. So a lot of people have turned him into a meme, right? So he feels like he doesn't get the respect that he should get, and when he sees people like Khabib or he sees people like Izzy who are getting that praise from the fan base, he feels like, hey, wait a second, I was the person that did what they did and did what they did for much longer. So why are they getting the respect that I should be getting? So the wash comment that Izzy made, I see what he means. In his last two fights, arguably he could have lost, especially the last one against Dominic Reyes. But the problem is that he didn't lose, and some people believe, based off his performance, it's either a natural decline as fighter gets older, or it might just be that he plateaued, right, to the point where he was just bored. He was just going through the motions. He's been doing it for so long. He just did what was needed of him to win those fights. So he didn't necessarily have that thirst or that drive that he would have previously in his other fights, when he faced DC, when he faced whoever you want to say, Shogun, right? He doesn't necessarily have that drive anymore.
But don't you also think it's a lose-lose situation for Jon Jones if he fights Izzy? Because if you put it this way, Izzy, I mean, he's moving up in weight, and Jon Jones, he's not even a natural light heavyweight. So he fights the dude. He's fighting a smaller guy who's been in the UFC for like a shorter amount of time, right? So you have to think that, like, even if he does win, like, it won't be to the same effect as if Izzy wins, right? So that's why I see it.
Yeah, it's not necessarily lose-lose. It may be from perspective of UFC, right? You lose on Izzy's potential to make you even more money and have another star. But from Jon Jones' perspective, he beats him, backs up all the talk that he did, uses that momentum to even become a bigger star, right? Get back at all the fans that hated on him, right? There's I don't think it's a lose-lose for Jon Jones, but maybe for the UFC. The whole projection, I keep repeating this, is Israel wanted to fight him in 2021. There is a chance. However, there's a roadblock that that Izzy has to get through first. It's Jan Blachowicz, right?
Yeah.
If he loses against Jan Blachowicz, that Jon Jones fight kind of goes on the back burner for a while until Izzy is able to regain his momentum and whatnot. I do know that Izzy made a comment when asked about that, saying, "Hey, why not fight Jon Jones right away instead of fighting Jan Blachowicz?"
Yeah.
And he said, basically, relax, calm down. It'll be better if I beat him and then make my way through.
Mm-hmm.
Just be patient. So there's that mystique around Izzy where he can't lose, and you want to believe that he'll just walk through Jan Blachowicz, but there's a big chance that he loses.
Yeah.
Because he's a much bigger guy. Izzy's saying that he's not necessarily putting on mass, which is the typical thing that people do, is that when they move up, they put on mass.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why is because they want to be able to absorb and fight people at the higher weight class in a similar type of body shape.
Yeah.
But he's basically saying that is the wrong school of thought. I am not going to gain weight. I'm going to just simply be at the fighting weight that I currently am at and just cut less weight, basically. So he's going to be the same fighter he was at 185, just less depleted from the weight cut.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of Izzy, though, Costa said his leg was injured in the fight against Izzy, and he shouldn't have fought him. Well, I mean, you could say it's true, because even when we were watching the fight, we saw Costa the whole time, and usually with his style of fighting, he likes to push forward, right? He's a pressure fighter, right? He's like he's the textbook pressure fighter, and we saw against his fight against Izzy, there wasn't much going on, right? He was just standing there, turtled up, and just taking hits like a heavy bag. But even then, man, like, to make this kind of claim, almost like a month after now, right? It's been a month, right?
Yeah.
It's been a month. I guess it's a little bit conceited of him, and also too with this with this whole
conceited, okay.
Yeah, I know, but the thing, you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just not, it's not a good look, right? And after all the Instagram beef and everything, so what do you think about his claim that his leg was injured?
So his claim was that his leg was injured.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of fighters who will always say, you never go 100% healthy into any fight. There's always some sort of injury, some sort of nagging issue that you always have.
Yeah.
Right. The most famous one recently is the Khabib's toe. Right. It was broken, and he fought through it, and he decided that he still wanted to fight, and he fought through it.
Mm-hmm.
Paulo Costa legitimately could have had a injured leg, and it could have affected him greatly in the fight.
Yeah.
It kind of sucks when the loser makes excuses for losing. It leaves a bad taste in your mouth, right? Because you're like, you lost, just let it be. Like, I understand you didn't necessarily have the best fighting shape, but it doesn't really help your case to say that your leg hurt. Like, I feel I have sympathy for you, but like, what do you want us to do? Like, you could have easily just backed out of the fight, but you don't want to, because that's your chance, right? That's just the fight game. As well, in that fight, he was eating a lot of inside leg kicks. He was eating a lot of kicks in general, and he was making it looked like he was making no effort to avoid them at all, right? So what really comes to mind as well is he could have also went on the offensive without necessarily using his legs, right? In terms of like leg kicks and stuff like that. He was gun shy, and Israel got into his head and played those games. He tried to play the game with Izzy when Izzy was pointing to the ground and all those strategies that he implemented. But as well, his whole fighting style is tailored to a guy like Paulo Costa. He wants a guy to come forward, eat his feints, right? Overreact to everything, eat shots whenever Izzy throws them. I don't think Paulo Costa was even in the position yet to win the championship, against a guy like Izzy. Maybe in a couple of years he'll get his shot if it's somebody else, or if he develops his game a little bit more.
You think he has
But
potential
right
to
now,
move up or no?
yeah. He cuts a lot of weight, so he has a potential to move up. Usually, when guys get a little bit older, cutting weight to that degree becomes more difficult. Then they move up.
Yeah.
But for now, he's fine. He can keep fighting, learn from his mistakes and his weaknesses, alter his game a little bit. Maybe do what Justin Gaethje did. And not in the Khabib fight, but in the Tony Ferguson fight, where he learns how to be more patient and not necessarily just come forward all the time, actually pick his shots and be more of a intuitive fighter overall. Because in his previous fights, he really just comes forward and just overwhelms his opponent until they break, or almost break. Like he tried to break Yoel Romero, but he still lost. He still won in that situation. But give him some time. I feel bad for him because like everybody dogs on him. I don't want him to become
Is
a
that a
meme
pun
as
or
well.
no?
He'll be fine in long term, but short term he should just leave this Izzy stuff alone and just move on.
But he's dying for the rematch, right? So I don't think he's gonna leave it alone until he gets the rematch. But
Win a couple more fights, and then we'll see.
Cormier hints at Khabib coming back, and the title not being vacated on his show with Ariel Helwani. And
What did he say exactly? I
so-
didn't get that he said that he hinted that he might come back.
So basically, what he said is that he was talking to Khabib, and he was like, "Brother, you have the shortest retirement in UFC history. You retired for 3 days, and they're already asking you to come back, right?" But I
In
guess
response to the Dana White news.
yeah, basically. And also, if you go deeper into what he's saying that he doesn't have to make this choice to retire, like, or fully retire until next summer, right? So he's basically saying that don't vacate the title. Wait till next summer and see what happens. And they're basically saying that maybe take the fight with Conor and Poirier into an interim belt. So that's kind of what he was saying. And he was saying that like just based off his combos with Khabib, that like he's not too sure if he's really retired for real. That's what he's saying. Yeah.
I know that the UFC is deciding not to strip him anytime soon.
Yeah.
To let everything play out. The Conor fight's not until January anyways, so there's a lot of time. There's actually news that it's not actually finalized.
That's weird.
So I don't know what's happening with that.
Well, they're saying that they might change
that
it
fight
to.
might not happen.
Yeah,
What?
they're saying that they might change that fight to Conor and Gaethje, right? So.
Yeah, and making that number one contender fight.
Yeah, which makes sense. That's if Khabib comes back, right? But he was also saying over here that it's a good point what he said though. He's at his prime age right now. If he has time to come back, as in a sense that like if he keeps fighting right now, he has time, of course, and he's in his prime. But I think what he's getting at is that basically saying that he does not have to rush this process, and that even if he does like let's say he's retired, he can still come back. But he also said that with Khabib, if he gives you his word, he usually means it, right? So I don't know. Honestly, it is too much conflicted, right?
It's a we'll see moment. I don't think DC has any more information than any of us in terms of whether or not he's going to come back. It really is going to be a wait and see situation for Khabib to decide whether or not he wants to continue fighting. Does his family support him fighting, and who is he going to fight? There's plenty of opponents still for him to face. He hasn't faced Tony and GSP, but there's also big rematches that could potentially happen that I think he might be interested in, the Conor or Justin Gaethje or Poirier, depending on what happens in the future. But right now it's too early to say anything. He still has to take time, go home, probably do Ramadan, right? Take that whole month, come back, see maybe how his teammate Islam Makhachev what he does. What if Islam starts winning or Islam starts losing, and he reacts based off of that.
I saw on Instagram though. I think he's already back in San Jose at the AKA gym, right?
Yeah. These guys, even though if they retire, they don't stop training because that's their whole life.
Yeah,
right. It's not necessarily just to become the champion, right? The reason why you train is also afterwards you want to stay in shape. You want to go to the gym. It's your whole life. So why not? Yeah, why not go to the gym? So I wouldn't look too much into him training at the gym as something, but this sport is very, very crazy. So you never know what could happen.
So just to quickly end it off, though, if he does come back, when do you think he'll be back, and who will he fight?
Summertime is probably the most likely time,
Summertime,
and it would be the champion for 155 or GSP.
Or GSP, eh? And you don't see Khabib moving up in weight? Just gonna be a lightweight?
No, he has never had interest in moving up in weight. He's always been fixated on his 155-pound class. It might, maybe a catch weight he might do with GSP. Mm-hmm. Or there's so many variables, but I don't think 170 is something that he's looking at to do.